Before the beginning of time there was only the endless void wherein dwelt beings of power who, in the tongue of the ancient Arana, were called Gaiat. There were among the Gaiat some few of immense power, some of moderate power, and few so feeble as to be barely self-aware, for as in all things, there must be balance. Most powerful of all was Armanhagen, dreamer of worlds, who liked not the cold darkness of the void. Armanhagen dreamed a great orb of burning light and poured his energy into his dream, and a sun was made manifest. He cast the sun into the void and saw that it was good, but was not yet content, and so he dreamed of 7 worlds and set them to circle the sun. Armanhagen looked upon his worlds and saw that they were dry and barren, and so he hearkened to those of the Gaiat who would answer his call. 7 greater and 7 lesser Gaiat came to him. "Behold what I have wrought," he said unto them. "These worlds I give unto you. Use what arts you have to make them live, for I have not the will to dally here. I have many dreams to dream, and soon it will be that the void is aglow with light and warmth." It was thus that our 7 greater and 7 lesser gods gained domain over the worlds of the first sun. The quiet making. An unfinished world's tale. On the 3rd world, which the greater gods would later name Vera, the greater Gaiat was called Tharion and the lesser was called Elara. Tharion was tall even among the greater, and his presence carried the weight of stone that had never known erosion. He spoke little. When he did speak, the air around him grew still, as if the world itself paused to listen. Elara was smaller, quieter in bearing, yet her attention never rested. Where Tharion looked upon the barren rock and saw only raw material, Elara looked and already saw the shape of what might grow. They began as all the pairs began, with silence and the slow testing of their gifts. Tharion raised the bones of the land first. He drew mountains from the crust in long, deliberate folds, then split them with deep valleys so that water, when it came, would have somewhere to run. He set the bones of the world with care but without tenderness. When the work of a season was finished, he would stand upon the highest ridge and look outward, as if measuring the distance between this world and the next. Elara worked differently. She walked the low places. She pressed her hands into the dust and waited until something answered. A thin green thread, a single hard seed, the first reluctant insect that learned to crawl. She spoke to the new things in a language that had no words, only attention. Under her regard, the barren plains began to darken with soil. Moss took the shadowed faces of Tharion's mountains. In the valleys, water gathered and did not simply run away. It lingered long enough to become pools, then shallow lakes. For a long time they did not quarrel. Tharion would shape a high plateau and leave it. Elara would arrive days or years later and cover it with tough grasses that could survive wind and thin air. He raised a chain of sharp peaks. She taught clouds to catch on them and release rain on the leeward side. The world grew, slowly and in layers. Neither claimed the work as solely their own. It was understood, in the way of the Gaiat, that the greater set the frame and the lesser filled it. Yet something began to change in Elara. She started to stay longer in certain places. There was a wide, shallow basin on the eastern side of the world where the soil had grown especially rich. She returned to it again and again, coaxing taller plants, then trees that learned to hold birds. One evening she remained there after the sun had gone, simply watching the new dark shapes move among the branches. When Tharion found her, she did not look up at once. "You linger," he said. "They are learning to sleep," she answered. "I wanted to see if they would wake." Tharion stood beside her for a time. The wind moved through the young trees with a sound that had not existed on Vera before. He said nothing more that night. Seasons passed in the long count of the gods. The basin became a forest. Rivers found their permanent courses. Creatures that had once been little more than restless matter began to carry memory from one day to the next. Elara gave them no names, but she knew them. She knew which of the small, furred ones would climb and which would dig. She knew the cry the long-legged ones made when the first true storm came. Tharion watched from higher ground. He still shaped when shaping was needed, a new range when the old mountains began to wear, a deeper channel when the rivers grew too restless, but his visits to the low places grew less frequent. When he did come down, he walked among the living things without touching them, as a man might walk through a room he does not intend to stay in. One day Elara found him standing at the edge of the forest she loved most. "You have made them too aware," he said. They were always going to become aware, she replied. That is what living means. No. Tharion's voice was quiet, but the leaves nearest him stopped moving. Living is continuity. Awareness is a different gift, and it was not required. Elara turned to face him fully. Armanhagen told us to make them live. He did not say how far. He did not need to. Tharion looked past her, toward the distant curve of the world. We were given these places so that they would hold shape and motion and the appearance of endurance. We were not given them so that they would look back at us. Something cold moved through Elara then, though the air was warm. You knew this from the beginning. I suspected, Tharion said. Now I am certain. He left her there among the trees. After that day, Elara worked with a different urgency. She did not try to make the creatures of Vera stronger or stranger. She tried to make them more themselves. She spent long periods simply remaining near them, teaching them, without language, the difference between hunger and fear, between the safety of the group and the necessity of the lone path. Some of them began to make marks on stone. Others gathered bright things for no clear purpose. A few sat still at dusk and watched the same direction the sun had gone, as if waiting for it to return with news. Tharion noticed. He came to her at the edge of the great basin one evening when the sky was the color of old copper. You are changing the terms, he said. I am completing the work, Elara answered. The work was finished when the world could sustain itself without us. Then why are we still here? Tharion was silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the last of its distance. Because the worlds were never meant to be permanent. Armanhagen dreams larger things. These 7 are practice. They are the first rough shapes a dreamer makes before the true work begins. We were sent to give them the appearance of life so that he could look upon them from the void and judge whether the pattern was worth repeating on a greater scale. When he is satisfied, or when he grows restless, he will turn his attention elsewhere. The sun will remain. The worlds will remain. But the particular brightness we have given them will not be required forever. Elara felt the ground under her feet as if it had thinned. You are saying they are temporary. I am saying they were always temporary. You have only made the temporary more painful by teaching it to know itself. She looked at the forest, at the slow movement of living things among the trunks, at the thin thread of smoke rising from a place where some of them had learned to keep fire. Then I will make the pain worth something, she said. Tharion did not argue further. He simply left. Time on Vera continued. The creatures Elara had tended grew stranger and more deliberate. Some learned to speak in rough, broken ways. They told each other stories about the tall quiet one who shaped mountains and the smaller one who walked among them and sometimes wept without sound. They did not know the names Tharion and Elara. They called them, in their own tongues, the stone and the green. Elara no longer tried to hide her presence. She allowed herself to be seen. When the small ones brought her offerings of fruit or bright feathers, she accepted them. When they asked, in the limited way they could ask, why the world was the way it was, she answered with silence or with a gesture toward the sky. She never spoke of Tharion's revelation. Some knowledge, once given, could not be taken back, she would not add to it. Then the contact came. It arrived without warning, on a night when the stars over Vera seemed closer than usual. A thin seam opened in the air above the highest peak Tharion had raised. Through it stepped a figure Elara did not know, taller than Tharion, thinner, wearing the look of someone who had traveled a long way through cold places. This was another of the greater Gaiat, one who held domain over the 6th world. He did not greet her. He spoke only to Tharion, who had appeared the moment the seam opened. Armanhagen has looked upon the 4th world, the stranger said. He found the pattern pleasing. He is preparing to dream again. Larger this time. He will need the light of this sun for a while yet, but the particular experiments are no longer necessary. Tharion inclined his head. How long? Not long, by our count. Long enough by theirs. The stranger glanced once toward the forest far below, where the small fires of the living still burned. You have allowed too much awareness here. It will make the ending noisier than it needs to be. That was not my doing alone, Tharion said. The stranger looked at Elara for the first time. His expression held neither anger nor pity. "The lesser ones often forget the scale," he said. "It is expected." Then he stepped back through the seam, and the air closed behind him as if nothing had ever been there. Tharion and Elara stood together on the peak for a long time after. "You knew this would come," she said. "I knew it could come," he answered. "I did not know it would come so soon." Elara looked down at the world she had filled with green and with watching eyes. "What happens to them when the pattern is no longer required?" Tharion's voice was almost gentle. "They continue for a time. The sun still warms them. The soil still holds them. But the particular attention that made them more than clever animals will fade. They will forget the questions they have only just learned to ask. The world will become quieter, safer, closer to what it was meant to be. And us. We will be called to the next dreaming, or we will remain as custodians of a finished experiment. It makes little difference." Elara stepped away from him. "I will not let them forget so easily," she said. Tharion did not try to stop her when she descended the mountain. In the seasons that followed, Elara worked as she had never worked before. She moved through every place that held life and pressed into the living things a deeper kind of memory. Not of her face or her name, but of the feeling of being seen. She taught the ones who made marks on stone to make marks that would last. She taught the ones who spoke to keep speaking even when the listener was gone. She walked the edges of their settlements at night so that they would grow used to the idea that something larger than themselves still paid attention. Tharion watched from a distance. He did not interfere. Once, when she returned exhausted to the high places, he said only, "You are spending yourself on what cannot be kept." "Then I will spend myself completely," she answered. The end, when it came, was not dramatic. There was no great fire from the sky, no sudden darkening of the sun. One ordinary morning the air over Vera simply felt thinner. The green things still grew. The creatures still moved and ate and spoke. But something essential had withdrawn, the way warmth withdraws from stone after the sun has gone. The questions the living ones asked each other began to grow shorter. The marks they made on stone became simpler. The habit of looking up at dusk and waiting for an answer slowly left them. Elara felt it happen inside her own substance. The part of her that had been woven into the awareness of the world was being gently, irrevocably, untangled. She walked one last time through the forest of the Great Basin. Some of the older creatures still turned their heads when she passed. A few made the soft sound that had once been a greeting. Most no longer noticed her at all. On the final evening she climbed the highest peak and found Tharion already there. "It is done," he said. "Not completely," Elara replied. She held out one hand. In the palm lay a single small stone, marked with a pattern no natural process would have made. "They will forget most of it. But not all. Somewhere in them the shape of the question will remain." Tharion looked at the stone for a long time. Then he closed her fingers over it. "Keep it if you wish," he said. "It will not change the larger dreaming." "I know." They stood together as the stars came out. Far below, the fires of the living still burned, fewer than before, but still present. The world of Vera turned under them, no longer unfinished, no longer quite alive in the way Elara had wanted, yet not entirely returned to silence either. Somewhere beyond the curve of the sky, Armanhagen was already dreaming of larger things. And on 6 other worlds, 6 other pairs of gods continued their own quiet makings, each believing, for a little while longer, that the work was their own. This was the first story of the unfinished worlds. 7 worlds, 14 gods. And none of them finished what they started. If this one stayed with you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments which world you want to see next.